Identical twins. What's the craziest way which you've abused your powers of mistaken identity? I had a friend who had an identical twin, and they both spent the first month of university, they went to the same school, convincing everybody that there was actually 3 of them and that they were triplets. By the time they decided to come clean, nobody would believe that there wasn't a third of them around somewhere. "You can't trick me, I've hung out with Lucas countless times," etc. My dad is an identical twin. When he was dating my mum in college, he used to play a game with his twin. He'd call my mum and partway through the conversation, hand the phone off to my uncle. My uncle would see how long he could carry the conversation before he had to tap out and hand the phone off to my dad. Anyways, the first time my mum ever said "I love you" to my dad, she was actually talking to my uncle. My uncle faltered, and that was when my mum realized what had been happening. They must have straightened everything out because they ended up married and had me. But seriously, what a colossal strategic error on my dad's part. My brother and I had a sequence of 10 numbers memorized, so if anyone ever asked if we were telepathic, we could prove that we were. This was like 3rd grade. I know 2 sets of twins that have created their own language. One of them taught them to their kids who are now step-siblings. I walked in one day and they were speaking what sounded like an alien language. They stopped for a second and stared at me because it had been a secret. My stepbrother ended up telling me, but I was amazed because it was a full conversation like it was completely normal. I just couldn't understand a word. My twin brother got me a detention for his dress code violation and neglected to tell me, which resulted in me almost getting suspended. In return, I failed his French test. My twin and I tried switching places for a day in grade school. It lasted all of 5 minutes because even though our teachers didn't catch on, her classmates knew and kept asking what I was doing in their class and where my sister was. My sister and I did the exact same thing. In 1st grade, the teacher had the class split up into different groups with my sister and I in different groups. After a little while, our teacher moved the groups so that I was moved from the craft table to the reading section, and my sister the opposite. I forget what happened, but our teacher had to leave the room for some reason, and I was able to convince my sister to switch places with me because I was a small child and wanted to do anything but read. When she came back into the room, she immediately noticed something was off and went to go get our mother, who was right across the hall with her kindergarten class. She immediately pointed out who was who, and we were sent off to the principal's office. This is the only story I have about us switching places because my sister respects authority and never wants to use being an identical twin to our advantage. That feels like a whole bunch of potential gone to waste. What's the point in having a superpower like an identical twin if you can't use it to mess with people? Here's a following couple of answers from people who weren't twins, but didn't let that stop them from abusing that power. I've run into people, not close friends, just acquaintances, I haven't wanted to talk to and have pretended to be my identical twin to avoid annoying small talk. "Oh, I'm sorry, you must think I'm my name. We're twins, this happens a lot." I'm not a twin, but had my whole class of 4th graders convinced that I was, and that my twin was also a teacher, and we would switch places and teach the other's class occasionally. It was hilarious hearing kids' theories on how to decide when I was me and when I was my twin. I went to kindergarten all the way through to the 12th grade with fraternal brother-sister twins. During the last "who gives a frick anymore" weeks of senior year, they switched places for a day and just refused to admit that they weren't each other. While in Iraq, I signed all of my legal rights over to my brother. That gave him legal rights to my bank account. When my family was in financial trouble, I gave the okay for my brother to take money out of my account. The bank refused to honor the legal documents and would not let my brother take money out. Next day, he went to the same bank with my passport and took the money out of my account anyway. My brother went to a job interview pretending to be me. I, or he, got the job and I've been working there for just over a year now. My father's father had an identical twin and they were both in the Air Force. First trick was that my grandfather was blind in one eye due to a childhood accident while running with scissors. His brother went and took his physicals for him, but they caught them just before pilot training. Fast forward, they're both active duty during World War II, and one is stationed in California while the other is stationed somewhere at a US base in the Pacific. My grandfather, Earl, was the guy who would put pilots in their cockpit and make sure it was sealed correctly before they took off. Mind you, these pilots are flying the fastest aircraft manufactured at the time, and nevertheless, my grandfather tells them right before they leave, "I'll see you when you get there," with a wink. His brother, with the same last name, imagine Private Swenson or whatever, was the guy who would undo the cockpits for the pilots after they landed in the Pacific, and he would say to them, "Hey, you made it! I got here pretty fast, huh?" Producing the most astonished look of bewilderment and amazement one could muster. They ran this joke for quite some time and even got written up in the newspaper about it later on. I thought it was such a great old joke. Hope you guys liked it. My identical twin died. There are some people who knew him but did not know he was a twin. When I bump into them accidentally, they always freak out. I have identical twin brothers. As children, they constantly called each other ugly, which they did not get but made my mother laugh every time. They still do it today, mostly as a dumb old joke. One of my nicknames for my twin is ugly. Some of the others are Lefty and Spare Parts. When I was younger, me and my non-twin sister convinced our younger sisters, who were twins, that everyone in the world is born a twin, so you've got spare parts if you have an accident. We made up stories about our own twins and how much we missed them, but how they'll always live on as our lung or whatever. Then we asked them which one of them was the spare. Twins fighting is brilliant. They're so evenly matched. One of my high school teachers said she had her twin take and pass her driver's test for her. No one was ever the wiser. My dad is a twin, and every so often one would break up with the other one's girlfriend. Oh man. How could you say those things? How could you be so cold? I don't know, it's like I hardly even know you. Bye. I imagine however it actually transpired, it left the girlfriends pretty confused in some way or another. I went to a convention with two friends who were identical twins. They dressed the same one day, hoping to throw people off and have some laughs, which worked perfectly, at least until they got separated. Then they both ended up going around in circles using the "Have you seen someone who looks exactly like me?" line to try and find each other. My dad has an identical twin brother. This is his famous story. My family is Iranian, and it's mandatory for young men to serve in the army for a minimum of 2 years. They do have a few exceptions. For example, if your eyes are weak or if you can't see without glasses, then you don't have to serve. My dad had the weaker eyes between the two of them, so he failed his own exam. He took his brother's ID to the army officers and failed the exam again to get his brother out of that responsibility. I'm reminded of a story I saw here on Reddit about a really old man who was with his wife for like 50 years, eventually ends up passing away, and without ever having told anyone he had an identical twin. So his brother shows up to the funeral and chaos ensues. That would be an awesome story, like if the other old man's life is in shambles at the time, so he shows up and then decides to keep playing his brother, who's extremely successful and loved all over town. He fakes everything by acting hella confused about the funeral. I don't know, just a thought. 1. Took the SAT for my brother. 2. My brother had me go on a date with a girl he met online when he was away. How did the date go? Did he end up continuing to see her? Did she ever found out? I have so many questions, you need to explain. 2 weeks later, when he came back from the trip, he went on a date with her and she didn't detect it. Later, when we told her, she couldn't believe it. We were all so entertained by this for a long time. There are some questions that the poster of this story never answers satisfactorily. How did the date go? Did she stay together with the original brother? Or the second one? Think of us nosy weirdos reading your stories when you post them. Dated a girl a couple of years ago that had an identical twin. They said they'd switch class schedules for a day and stuff like that for fun. I was able to tell them apart due to the way that they presented themselves. Everyone has slightly different facial expressions and stuff like that. For fun, my girlfriend would leave the room I was in and her twin would sometimes come in and pretend to be her. Rarely worked. Fun game though, and no, I didn't have a three-way with them, so don't ask. Man, if you noticed that you were talking to the sister, you should have played it off like you didn't know. Then when your girlfriend came back in, said stuff like, "Oh man, you've never kissed me so passionately before, that was amazing." My sister and I were handed each other's picture forms on our senior year picture day in high school. We thought it might be funny to not switch them back, take each other's yearbook, school ID card pictures, and have a few people know we did it. Harmless shenanigans, right? Then one day at the end of the year, after SATs, AP tests, and college applications were all over, I got called into the principal's office. This had never happened to me before, and I had no idea why on earth I'd be called down, since I hadn't gotten into any trouble. I get there, and my sister has already arrived, and I'm just like, oh crap. Principal sits us down and tells us that when cross-referencing our school ID photos and the driver's licenses we provided at the SAT, College Board found a discrepancy and was investigating the possibility that we might have taken each other's tests. I hadn't even thought about that being a possibility, and all the blood went to my stomach. My sister and I freaked out, and as calmly as we could tried to explain what we thought was a harmless prank. But he kept a straight face and insisted that if there was any possibility that we switched tests, our scores would be invalidated. After about 10 minutes of explaining and reasoning with him about how we'd comply with any investigation, but we swear we took our own tests and so on, he calmly told us it was all a joke. I felt like I was going to pass out. He was laughing his butt off and saying things like, "Got you good," and reassuring us that everything was fine and that we should go back to class. Turns out that since we have family in the school district, the principal had heard that my sister and I switched and decided it would be brilliant to make us think our futures were in danger. In his defense, it was an objectively fantastic prank and his delivery was so level and authoritative, it at no point occurred to us that College Board doesn't reference yearbook photos to confirm identities. Props to him for creativity, but what goes around comes around. In conclusion, sister and I switched places on a yearbook day. Our principal pranked us hard months later by making us think our life careers were in danger. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not a twin, but Asian. Back in middle school, my friend and I took each other's classes for an entire day and no one noticed. I think the best one I ever heard was twins who worked super ultra overtime at the same job by simply pretending to be the same person and trading off shifts, putting in a 120 hours a week or so. A teacher of mine who's a triplet told us that once she took an exam for her sister that she already took and studied for, got an A- for herself and an A for her sister. And the third triplet got a D because the other two excluded her from the scheme. Honestly, being an identical twin is not so much about cool pranks as it is responding to people who ask, "Why are you so nice to them in chem class and then totally ignore me when I try to talk to you in English?" Or this, most common problem, "Guy, hey, what's up? Love the new hair." Me internally, "Do I know this guy? I didn't do anything special to my hair. Who are you? I can't remember who anyone is." Then out loud, "Hello, Guy. How brutal was that test the other day, right?" Me internally again. "Maybe he's in my psych class? Wait, did we even have a test? Maybe just go along with it. Oh, I am totally screwed for next week." Guy. "Next week? The final's not until the end of the quarter." Finally. "Oh no, he thinks I'm my twin. Should I say something? That'd be awkward. I'll look like an idiot for just pretending to know him. He might get embarrassed. Maybe I can just wing it and no one will have to know that I'm me." At this point in the conversation, I decide if I should continue to be my twin or reveal myself. This is definitely my fault, in part, because I'm so bad at remembering faces. People in my classes, people at bars, people from past classes. I'll meet people on a smoke break and find out that, to my surprise, they've been sitting the next table over from me for a few weeks. Add twinliness into the mix and it's so awkward. Imagine the "is he waving at me" feeling all the time. I get that, plus a conversation. If they ask for help or make it obvious that they just want to chat, I tell them I'm the twin. My brother and I went to different colleges and didn't generally reveal to the friends we made that we each had a twin. One day, a group of people approached me in the street, calling me by my brother's name and asking me if I'd like to join them in the pub. I knew that my twin brother was already at the pub, so I said I'd bet them free drinks if I beat them to the pub in a foot race, even if I gave them a head start. They agreed and ran off at top speed while I stood there casually checking my watch and buffing my fingernails on my lapel, only for them to arrive exhausted and find me standing at the bar, drink already in hand. It's doubly impressive that he managed to change clothes on the way to the pub. I have a twin sister. I'm a guy. My little brother was born 2 years later on the same day. However, now that we're older, we look practically identical, close enough to fool his kids at least. When we do stuff together, we often get asked if we're twins. I answer yes, he answers no. This will need some backstory. My wife is a twin. Her sister and her both work at the same camp. My wife worked at the camp during the school year, while my sister-in-law worked during the summer when there was a lot more staff. Basically, they were trading places all the time, but staff of the camp would change during those times as well. Summer staff versus non-summer staff. So it was never really an issue. My wife worked mostly in the kitchen, while her sister worked as a counselor. Generally, the two were never seen together when they were both working there. It should also be said that my sister-in-law was often mistaken for a few other people around camp anyway, which only helped the situation in the end. At the end of the week, the groups of campers would do skits. One group of campers decided their skit would be about a machine that would multiply things. So my sister-in-law decided to help them out. The skit came down to the campers saying that my sister-in-law was such a hard worker that she needed a clone to help out around camp. At this point, the campers in this particular group knew about her twin, but most of the other campers did not. They turned on the machine and put my sister-in-law in. Out came her and a boy that had the same hair color and style, but that wasn't quite right. They got rid of the boy and put her back in. Out came a girl with a different hair color, but at least it was a girl this time. Next, the machine spit out a girl with the right hair color but not quite the same build. The fourth time, the machine spits out my wife. Being a nearly identical twin, this basically blew the audience away. In conclusion, my wife and sister-in-law freaked out some kids and even some adults with their shenanigans. What you guys don't understand, and maybe some other twins can back me up here, is that it's not so much tricking the teacher when switching classes as it is keeping all the other students quiet about it, since they can usually tell right away. At least for me and my brother anyways. My sister and I have picked on my partner quite a bit. We've tricked him in mostly harmless ways, but it's fun to watch his reaction. Other than that, we've always had the same schedules at school, so we haven't really taken advantage of our twin powers. I'm curious to see other responses.
I dated an identical twin in high school and I was always terrified that they would frick with me. The only way that I could tell them apart was because my boyfriend had a dot on his forehead. But what if they'd drawn one on the other twin and had him pick me up just to mess with me? Ah, the anxiety.
Note to self, never date twins. Or perhaps I'll end up meeting someone that has a twin without telling me in any case, and then the charade will go on even longer. Oh god, this is terrifying. I worked in a locked psychiatric ward while my twin brother works in a local emergency room. According to him, he has had at least 2 scary as frick psych patients come up to him saying,
"Hey John, you crazy frick, how are ya?"
And then ensues a long, scary conversation that he is not me in. I knew a pair of identical twins in high school who fricked with people all the time. I quickly learned how to tell the difference out of self-defense, and they always gave me grief for ruining their fun. We'll call them Steve and Dave. Anyway, here's the story they told me. At their high school, they were both starters for the football team. One was a running back and the other the fullback. For 4 years, Dave blocked for Steve, as Steve got the yards, the touchdowns, and the records. In the final game of their senior year, they switched jerseys without telling their coach, and for one game, Steve blocked for Dave. Dave set the school's single-game rushing record under Steve's name. Because they were blabbermouths, the story got out and the coach was teed off at them for lying and for making him look like he'd put the wrong brother at the running back the whole time. I had a good friend growing up whose dad was a twin. A group of us girls went to the movies one night. Twin's dad's daughter goes to the bathroom while we wait for her in the lobby. Wouldn't you know it, not even 5 seconds later, we see her dad in the distance, holding hands with another woman. We start freaking out, thinking we've caught her dad cheating. Friend comes out and we explain the situation, ready for battle. She laughs and says, "Oh, that's my aunt and uncle." Then she goes up to them and gives them a hug. My twin sister and I aren't really able to fully utilize our ability due to not living with each other for most of our lives, but we do like to have fun with it. If we visit each other's town with a new group of friends, we'll switch places with one another and always make the newcomer look like they're amazing at figuring out random tips and tricks of the city. On a more serious note, my sister and I switched places about 8 months ago in order to save her from a terrible boyfriend. My sister is too sweet to her to fly, but she really needed to dump this guy, so we switched places. I met up with the jerk at the bar and told him very honestly that him and I, my sister, couldn't be together due to his abusive nature. Not identical, but fraternal, still both girls, which makes more alike than not alike. We would usually say things at the same time, but that was a coincidence. When we realized this, we started doing it on purpose to creep people out, and it really creeped them out. One especially that I remember was in 8th grade. A dude always told my sister she confused her with me, so we knew that if he saw us together, he would say something along the lines of, "You're totally identical." So the time comes and he says that, so we go and say at the same time, "What are you talking about? We're totally different." The look on his face was priceless. I wish I could have recorded it. This doesn't really go with abusing my powers of identity so much as going out of my way to not be mistaken as my twin sister. She dated some D-bag in high school who literally could not tell us apart at all. He began pursuing her, but since he was an idiot, he didn't even really take the time to get to know the difference between us two. He would mistakenly hug me or be flirty or check me out or call my sister's name, all while my twin was standing 1 foot away. It became too awkward for me to the point where I just completely ignored his presence and didn't make eye contact when he was around, so he'd finally stop mixing us up. Sometimes that didn't work, so I would immediately sarcastically insult him and throw in a couple of dudes and bros to solidify the fact that I was the non-romantic twin. Even then, this moron couldn't read the flashing signs, so I just started to turn around and walk away whenever he approached. He eventually picked up that his twin was the one who wasn't a complete B-word to him. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.